There are 5 questions that you need to ask yourself before you write your book. Do you know what those questions are? Right. If you don't, that's okay. We're going to talk about that today.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author and also here to offer you some writing tips. So today let's talk about those 5 questions that are important for you to ask yourself before you start writing your book. Now, how did I discover these magical 5 questions? Only through trial and error, right? Only through not asking myself the questions or not even knowing that I should be asking myself any questions at all. So as I began to brainstorm ideas for my next novel just a few weeks ago, I asked myself these very questions. Now, a story is not just the story, meaning it's not just the plot of the story. The story is so much more than that, and it should be to you. And if it is to you, it will be to your readers as well. As I started considering what the next novel or my next novel was going to be, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, which is I wanted to write a different type of story. So as I say at the beginning of each one of these videos, I'm a women's fiction author. Well, what does that mean? It means that I write relationship stories. Typically, there are romantic relationships, but they don't have to be. They could be mother-daughter relationships. They could be relationships between sisters, just any type of relationship, right? And so, but my next novel is going to be a little different. It's more of a story based, I want to say loosely, but based more or less on my father's immigration story, my parents' immigration story to this country. But I don't want it to be a story about immigration, right? So that's not my intention. But I have to ask myself, okay, what is my intention then? What is the goal of this story? And that's really the biggest question that you want to ask yourself is why are you writing this story? What's the goal that you have for yourself, for the story, and for the readers? What do you want them to get out of this story? Now, for me, this was and is a family history. It's a family story. And the reason that I even thought about writing it is because I have this huge notebook, stack of letters that my father and my grandfather wrote to each other. And really, that's all it has been for years since I was a teenager and my grandmother gave me these letters. And it's been put away, the paper starting to turn very yellow. It's very old, right? And really, all I ever intended to do it was save it, share it with my brother, share it with my children. It's just kind of a family history kind of thing. But just recently, I just started to think that maybe I wanted to write a novel based on this story. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do or how I wanted to do it. And so the first thing I had to do was ask myself, okay, why do you want to write this story? What is your goal with the story? What is it that readers are going to gain from reading this story? These are questions that I have to ask myself because the reader will ask themselves that. The reader is always going to ask this very important question, which is, what's in it for me? Even in a novel, if they're going to waste any time at all reading a novel, your book, my book, they want to know, like, why am I doing this? What's in this book that is so interesting that I want to waste the next 2 hours to 2 weeks or however long it's going to take them to read it? And you need to understand as a writer that the reader is thinking that. And therefore, if they are thinking that, that means we have to know what's in it for them. What are they going to get out of this story? Why should they read it? And if you can answer those questions, you will write the story that they'll be interested in reading. Now, sometimes we may not like the answer that we get. So maybe sometimes as we are asking the questions that we need to ask, we may find out that no, there really isn't anything in here for the reader. There isn't. This is something that's interesting to me, but it's not something that most people will want to read. Or maybe the way that I'm putting this together isn't going to have that dramatic effect that the reader is going to want. So maybe I either want to change the story, or I want to not have this story. I want to just share the story with my family or with somebody else, right? Just people who really have a stake in the story. So if that's the case, if we find that no, for whatever reason, this isn't this isn't going to meet reader expectations, then we need to put that story aside. However, if we can change it, like in my case, I'm basing it on something true. There are some things that I can change because, again, it's going to be fiction. It's not going to be the story. It's not going to be an autobiography. I mean, well, biography of my father, right? It's not going to be an autobiography of my life. It's just going to be a story based on some of the things that they went through when they moved to this country. But it needs to be a story. It needs to be an interesting story. It needs to have the same things that every other story has. It needs to have those plot points. It needs to have that hero's journey. It needs to have those things, right? Otherwise the reader is not going to be interested. So your job and my job as a writer is to be able to craft this story in a way that is going to be interesting to the reader. And we need to figure out how to do that, which is the hard part. That's what writing is all about, right? How do I craft this story so that it's interesting? It doesn't drag. It doesn't drag in the middle. It doesn't have boring parts, what readers would consider boring parts, right? So how do we create this story for maximum effect? And that's part of what our job is as a writer. So let's go over the questions. Okay, so the first question is what I've been talking about. Why do you want to write this story? Why is this project important to you? What's motivating you? What is creating that interest? Because you need to know that, because that's what's going to keep you interested in the story. If you have reasons why you love this story, if you have reasons that you want to tell the story, then you're going to be invested in your story, right? So what you want to do first is write down all the reasons. Why is it that you want to write this story? What has inspired you to write it? What's driving you to get it done? And write all those things down. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is, what do you have to gain from writing the story? Now, most people think, okay, well, fame or money, right? These are the things that we have to gain as writers or readers. But no, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, what is it that you're getting from writing this story? Is it a better understanding of a certain topic or theme? Is it a better understanding of a person or an experience that you had? Is it to be able to relive a certain experience that was great? Is it for whatever reason? What's your topic? What is maybe the theme of your story, and why is it that you want to write it or that you need to write this down? Even the simplest novels have something that you're gaining from it. It doesn't have to be something major. It can be just that you saw a movie about a certain topic. Let's just say bank robbery, just for something to say. And you thought it was good, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. Like, it's like, I could have written that so much better, right? So maybe it's just a challenge to yourself where you're saying, the reason that I want to write this story is because I thought this other story was so great, but it could have been better. I could have written it differently. It would have been better if this had happened. So I want to try my own version of that story. So it could be just something like that. But what is it that you think you will gain from writing your story? And the next part is very important. It's what I mentioned before. What is it that your readers will gain from your story? So, and it does not have to be the same thing. So sometimes we hope to write something for whatever reason. So let's use my example. If I'm writing the story about my father's journey here to America, what am I gaining from it? Well, maybe I'm gaining a, a reconnection with my dad, right? So I get to see my dad in a different light because I knew him when he was much older, obviously. And I don't remember. Well, I don't remember him when I was young, and I didn't obviously know him before I was born. But through this, I get to sort of explore maybe what his life was like what were some of the things he was thinking, what some of the things he was doing. And so that's what I gain, let's say. Okay. Well, what will my reader gain? And definitely not the same thing, because they could care less about this man that they know nothing about. So what they're gaining is whatever this novel is telling them. Um, One of the things that I am exploring, I guess, with this story is that immigrant experience, but but deeper than that. Not just the immigrant experience, but um, I guess the immigrant expectation of what life is going to be like in the United States. But it's universal, because it's not just what he's expecting, and that it's unique to him. I think that it is something universal for everybody. So whether you're an immigrant or not, by the way, right? So when we're young, we have all these dreams and expectations of what our life is going to be like. And does it turn out the way that we envision it when we are 15 or 20 years old? Or does it not? And if it doesn't turn out the way that we thought it was going to be, or the expected way that most of us think our life is going to go, then why not? Why is it that is it choices that we make along the way that take us on different paths? Is it information that we lacked, that we didn't have, right? So that could be part of uh, the reason why we may or may not reach our goals. Is it something deeper? Is it something that is the American dream a reality, or is it not? So there are a lot of different things that I think that I hope to show with this novel and my dad's story. Now, that's what the readers will get out of this book. So when they're finished reading my book and they close it, they will have an understanding that is different from my understanding, or it could be the same, right? But it's a journey for them through this person, through watching this person live their story life. Then they come to a better understanding of success, of the American dream, of whatever it is that I'm adding to the story. So one of the things you have to ask yourself is that, like, what is your story really about? We've talked about the significant story question, then this is where I'm getting at, right? This is the thing about the book. What is this book about? And if you understand that, then you can convey that through your story to the reader, and then the reader will, whether they know it or not, whether they will feel it, that they have gotten something out of this book, and that something is the understanding or the answer to your significant story question. So again, I've discussed this before. I've written about this before. So if you want to know more about it, you can definitely look at other videos and come to understand that, because it's very important. I think that the biggest mistake that writers make is that they don't really understand what the reader is going to get out of their book. They're just writing a cool story, but it's more than just a cool story. Okay, the next question that I think is important to ask yourself is, what will repel your readers away from your story? So there are many things, right? So depending on the topic and what we're writing about, it may be something that may turn readers off. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, how am I presenting this story? Am I being too preachy? Am I being, am I sort of heavy-handed with this theme? And if so, I need to change that. I need to modify that so it doesn't come off sounding like that. Also, are there boring parts to the book? Which, as writers, we tend to think that no real part of our book is boring. But as a critic, when we go back and we reread it and we look at it, we say, okay, it does seem to be dragging here. Does this scene need to be here? So anything like that you think might turn your reader off, then that's something we need to address, right? So we need to ask ourselves, okay, is this kind of a tightly plotted story, or are there parts, or did I not plot my story? Did I just sort of do a loose outline, and I really need to go back now that now that it's written, or now that I've got a better understanding of the story, and take some of those things out if I need to, so that it's not boring, so that everything that's in that story is needed, and it all moves your story forward, or just anything, or if there is is something that you think could be controversial or could be taken the wrong way, is there a way to reframe that so that you're not turning off your readers? So think about that and ask yourself that question. Okay, and then the last question is, how do you want to present your story? What is the best way to tell this story? Is it is it a historical? Do you want to go back in time and then just go through the years in order? Is it does it have fantasy elements, and then how do you want to bring those in? Do you want to add things like flashbacks? Do you want to write it as a series of essays? Do you want to write it as fiction or nonfiction? So there's a lot of things that we need to ask ourselves. And so what is the best way to present the story, and how will the reader be able to follow it best? So I read a memoir just recently, and the writer, you're dealing with a memoir, so you're dealing with something that really happened. But she did jump back and forth in time a lot. So saying, this is where I'm at with my mom now, but this was what happened at this point. But she did it very skillfully, so it didn't feel disjointed, and it was easy to follow. So you could see what was going on in her current life, and every time that she did go back in time, she created these scenes of that time period, and it worked very well. So is that a way that you want to structure your story? But ask yourself that question. What is the best way to do this, and how can I present it to the readers in a way that will be interesting and that will follow some kind of structure so that the reader isn't completely lost. So hopefully this gives you something to think about before you start writing your story, so that you have the answer to these questions and you're clear about what your story is about, why you want to write it, why your reader should read it. And one of the things you want to think about and kind of envision is in the future, right, when your book is finished and it's sitting in Amazon or it's sitting on a bookshelf somewhere, and somebody is picking it up and looking at it and reading that back cover copy and saying, what are they going to ask themselves? They're going to read that and they're going to say, why should I buy this book? Why should I invest money in this book? What am I going to get out of it, right? So if you're answering those questions both for yourself and for the reader, it's going to be very clear to the reader why they're going to be interested in it. Or if they put it back, that's okay too, because you've clearly spelled out why it's not for that reader. And it doesn't have to be for every reader, right? So maybe that reader will say, no, this book really is not for me. But you want to make it super clear for the readers that the book is written for, so that when they do pick it up, they know immediately, like, yeah, this story was written for me. I understand. I resonate with this story and I want to read it. Okay, so I hope this helps you, and that you go home now. If you're home now, you sit down and you start to answer those questions and be really clear on the answers. All right, I hope this helps. If it does, please hit the like and the share button, and come back and see me next Friday for the next writing tip.